Good morning and welcome to the Propeller Club of Northern California. It is Tuesday, September 6th, and we have a very full schedule because we not only have Mike Jacob from PMSA, who's going to be giving us our Howard Terminal update, and there are a number of lawsuits that are pending that Mike will discuss with us. But Ed Washburn from Pasha Group is here. His ship has come in after 3 years, and he looks 10 years younger. And Ed's going to give us a short briefing on the George III, and it is the brand new Emerald in the Jones Act fleet. Ed and the Pasha people have done a tremendous job getting that ship from start to finish. He'll tell us about that. In the meantime, we are going to do a very quick introduction because we do have a lot of people, we do have a lot going on today, but I would like to have everybody just quickly introduce themselves. And I will start where I usually start. Todd Crawshaw, good morning, and introduce yourself.
Good morning, Todd Crawshaw, Crawshaw Design. Provide integrated brand marketing for print and web and IT support.
For us.
Yes, that's correct.
I don't know what we do without you. Joe Ramsey from Port of Long Beach. Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to join everyone this morning from Port of Long Beach Business Development Division. Just wanted to hear what Mike had to share with us today.
Very good. Good to see you again, Joe. I see Captain Ann McIntyre. Captain, good morning.
Morning. How is everybody today?
High on life, Captain.
Good, good, good.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, hi. Sorry. So I'm Ann McIntyre. I'm the business director for the San Francisco Bar Pilots. Very interested to hear Mike's talk today, and I'll pass it off to my colleague, John.
Very good.
Morning. John Collier, Port Agent, San Francisco Bar Pilots.
Good morning, Captain John. Thank you. Peter Dreyfus.
Good morning. I am a co-founder of Watermaster North America. We are making in Michigan a shallow water dredger up to 20 feet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And we need to have you come back and give us an update. That in itself is an interesting Jones Act story. Greg Feeney, board member Greg Feeney. Good morning, sir. Greg?
Good morning. How you doing, Stas?
I'm good. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Greg Feeney from Port Transfer down here in the Overweight Corridor in Oakland. And a board member for a long time. Just looking forward to hearing what's going to happen today. So hey, I'm here.
Very good. Thank you, Greg. Melvin McKay. Good morning, Mr. Melvin.
Good morning, Stas. Melvin McKay from ILWU.
Very good. Thank you, Melvin. Bill Nixon.
Bill Nixon, old tramp agent and current on the board of directors of the Marine Exchange.
Thank you, Bill. Ellen Jonk. Ellen, good morning.
Oh, hi. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Stas. How are you?
Good.
Yep. I'm an environmental cultural resources consultant doing a lot of work for the ports around the Bay. I hope everyone comes and visits my latest project, which is bringing the 1924 ferry boat Klamath back to the waterfront. It's now at Pier 9. I've been working on this for 2 years. It's owned by the Bay Area Council, and they restored it. And I've been part of all the preservation plan and the permitting for everything, and should be open to the public by the end of the month. So I hope you all come around to Pier 9 and look at it and come and see our beautiful boat.
Ellen, if you would send me a note or an email, I will distribute that.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Emily Sinclair. Emily, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Emily Sinclair in Corporate Communications at the Pasha Group and Pasha Hawaii. Good to see everybody.
Thank you very much, Emily. Ed Washburn, why don't you introduce yourself? We're going to see you in a minute, but we'll do it twice.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Stas. Ed Washburn, Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations with Pasha Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Evie Wong. Good morning, Evie.
Good morning, Stas. Good morning, everyone. Evie Huang, I'm with Albert Wills Up, current president of the Customs Brokers Forwarders Association, a proud member of PCNC. Thank you, Stas. And a proud member of the Port of Oakland stakeholders. Anxious to hear from Mike. Stas, we all know what that means, and anxious to hear Mike's update on what's going on with our terminal and all that.
Very good. Thank you very much. Gabriela Jimenez. Good morning, Gabriela.
Morning, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm with Burke Davis Public Affairs, and yeah, just happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Charles Labitan. Charles?
Yes, hello, this is Charles Labitan. I'm with the Port of San Francisco, the new manager, marketing and trade development. I'm always eager to learn about the Bay Area since I'm new here, and I'm looking forward to the presentation today.
Charles, thank you very much. John Byrne. John, good morning.
Good morning, Stas. Good morning, everyone. John Byrne, Director of Corporate Marketing at Matson Logistics.
Thank you very much. Keith Schneller, I'm glad you made it. Keith, good morning.
Yeah, thank you, Stas. We appreciate all these great webinars that you all are providing. And I work with the Almond Board of California, and Oakland is one of our major export ports. So very interested to learn more about the future of what's going to happen there in the port. Thank you, Stas.
Keith, thank you very much. Susan Ransom. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, everybody. Susan Ransom, Client Relations Manager for SSA Oakland and a board member of the Propeller Club. I look forward to hearing Mike's update.
And you had a very interesting heart-to-heart talk with the mayor of Oakland last week.
Yes, I did. It was very interesting.
Yes. Okay. On that note, Sydney Thiessen, good morning.
Good morning. This is Sydney Tyson. I'm an assistant account executive with Avalon, filling in for Deidre Hudson and the rest of the San Francisco Avalon office.
Thank you very much, Sydney. Kevin Policarpo. Kevin, good morning.
Morning. Morning, Mr. Margaronis.
And who are you, Kevin?
Hello, my name is Kevin Policarpo. So I happen to work under Mr. Margaronis as his researcher. Sure, I help out with gathering information, helping put together various reports for him helping out with making database bases to contact bases for contacts, and also helped out with organizing stuff around his office.
Right, and we're working on the Storms, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense Conference as we speak. Kevin, thank you very much. Have I missed anybody, Todd?
Not sure. Hard to keep track of all the names.
I'm Peter Schrappen, American Waterways Operators. My first meeting here with you all, thanks. Relatively new to AWO, tugboat, towboat, and barge industry, and I'm a new board member of the Propeller Club here in Seattle.
Peter, very welcome, and we welcome your participation. And please, let's stay in touch. We'd be delighted to have you joining us as often as your schedule allows.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Did I miss anybody else?
Speak up.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay.
We asked if stay muted when the speakers are talking. That would be helpful.
Yes. That would be helpful. Okay. Ed Washburn. Ed, I am going to, I've slightly introduced Ed, and Ed has introduced himself. Ed, your ship finally came into town last week. Tell us about it.
Oh, well, thank you, Stas. Yeah, so the first maiden voyage to the Port of Oakland. We were fortunate enough to have Stas grace us with his presence. It was an excellent event. We had the executive director, Danny Wan, there. We had Mayor Libby Schaff, and Susan Ransom. We're very grateful for her to be there, and to her and the other SSA folks helping us out in the terminal. But it was the first voyage. I have a couple slides, Stas, I could share, and I can just run through that, and it might be a little more descriptive. It's okay, I'll share now.
Yes, please.
Yikes. Okay. This was George III arriving in Honolulu, August 21st, her maiden voyage. Unique to this voyage is a record number of containers for Pasha Hawaii, 1,114, and a record number of reefers for Pasha Hawaii. The ship left Long Beach, made it to Honolulu, 21.5 knots with only 70% engine load. So riding really easy. We're super proud of the ship. This is August 31st, our maiden call into Oakland. Here, she's coming back mostly with empties and some loads from Hawaii for the US mainland. A little bit about this ship. She's 774 feet long, 115 feet wide. It's a proprietary design, not an off-the-shelf design. So this hull went through computational fluid dynamics, was optimized by Keppel. That design went to American Bureau of Shipping, was further optimized. And that design went to the Maritime Research Institute of the Netherlands. And there they model test and designed a propeller and a high efficiency rudder to match the efficient hull. The hull is extremely efficient. We did in the model testing add energy saving devices to see if we can improve it. We weren't able to improve the efficiency of the ship, which proved that the hull is the most optimized. So as of today, it's still safe to say this is the most technologically advanced hull for a container ship in the world. So the ship is currently operating. She was delivered out of Brownsville, Texas by Keppel Landfills on July 28th. August 17th, we did our very first commercial bunkering on the US West Coast. Port of Long Beach and SSA was extremely helpful in that process and the permitting. Went very well. I have a slide on that coming up. We're also very fortunate. The ship is running extremely reliable, running on gas since it left the shipyard, and really no issues. We're running the same as we would on MGO. The engineers are completely comfortable with the system and knowledgeable in it, and there's a lot of confidence in the ship now. The design, as I was saying, is extremely efficient. So our first maiden full loaded voyage at 21.5 knots, full of cargo, we had less than 2% propeller slip. Our typical ships can be between 5 and 18. So that is just dramatic and really helps the environment.
Ed, would you describe that? You just used a term not everybody knows.
The propeller slip. So on this particular ship, one rotation of the propeller should propel the ship 33 feet if it's 100% efficient. So we're 98% efficient. So we're going a little over 32 feet. But, so basically, the higher the slip, the more fuel you're wasting. You're not getting thrust out of that.
Thank you.
Out of that energy. Yep. So all the systems are operating as designed, operating well. And our second ship being built at Keppel Landfill's sister ship will be delivered in December 2022. So I'll go a little bit into how we bunker the ship. We buy our LNG from Clean Energy in Boron, California. We've developed our own it's a joint venture with World Fuel Services and Clean Marine Energy and Pasha Hawaii. The name of that joint venture is called West Coast Clean Fuels. So West Coast Clean Fuels does the permitting and delivery logistics. So We have 40 of these ISO LNG tankers. We have 6 LNG powered trucks, and that's how we shuttle or get the fuel to the terminal. It's stored in the terminal. We can store up to 400,000 gallons at the terminal. We have a dedicated location at SSA, PRA in Long Beach. And then when the ship comes in, we set up a 6-pump bunkering skid, and then we pull the trucks in 6 at a time, and we can pump 1,800 gallons a minute. And theoretically, it's about a 4-hour bunkering. It's taken us about 8 hours, and we're getting better at it each time. This is what the bunkering event looks like. There's currently 5 trucks here. Usually one's pulling in or pulling out. This is the bunkering skid. This is the control for the pumps and all the valves. And then there's a generator outside that. And these are the LNG trucks that bring the LNG to the vessel. And all the LNG goes up this 1 6-inch line to the bunker station and goes into these tanks, which holds 540,000 gallons. The LNG is stored at minus 262 degrees. So it's a liquid, it's cryogenic. The safety systems on the ship are designed and engineered, and they're extremely expensive. So it's the best money can buy to make sure things stay safe, and they are very safe. There's been no maritime casualties for LNG, and LNG has been used as a fuel since the 70s on LNG tankers. So that's kind of the new ship and how things are going. We are converting another ship to LNG. This is the Reliance. It's in its 3rd and final docking now. So basically, we're changing the engine room, and basically the whole engine room got removed. The whole area got blasted and coated, and we're going in with a new LNG powered diesel plant. So it will have basically the same equipment and same capacity as our new vessels, but this will be a converted one. So by April of next year, we'll have 3 ships calling the US West Coast running on LNG. That kind of wraps it up. This is our CEO and president, George IV, at the helm of George III. And we just thought that was a fun picture.
Okay. So very quickly, the schedule is the ship goes to Hawaii from Long Beach, and
My passport to Comcast.
Todd, can you mute him, please? Thank you. Sorry. The rotation is Long Beach, Hawaii, Oakland, Long Beach.
That's right. Yep. Long Beach, Honolulu, Oakland.
And that's a 2-week trip.
That's 2 weeks. Yep. And exactly 2 weeks. So we
Okay.
have about 6 days in port during those 2 weeks.
And how many loaded 40s do you carry?
The ship will carry 1,200 loaded 40s.
Very good.
Yep.
And the emission savings, have you done any calculations on that?
Sure. So, and I had the opportunity to share with the Port of Oakland and Port of Long Beach recently, but so the important parts that are really have a positive impact on the communities in the port areas, the particulate matter, which those of us who live and work in port areas are familiar with, that fine black dust, that's completely eliminated. And then the other harmful product to the people in the port communities is the sulfur. And the sulfur, when it mixes with moisture in the air, creates sulfuric acid, which results in this acidic dew and acid rain. And on these ships, that's completely eliminated. And then the contributors to global warming and the greenhouse gases, they're substantially reduced or eliminated. So the environmental benefit is fantastic. It's not a zero emission or a carbon free, but it is the only fuel that can operate high horsepower marine ships and do it in the best environmental practice available. There's nothing else that can push 40,000 horsepower or run 40,000 horsepower and have the energy available to carry on a ship.
Great. Okay. Well, Ed, I know that for you and the Pasha group, this was a long, hard slog. My hope is that you have trailblazed the way that we can start producing these ships on a much more rapid basis, and with a lot less of some of the issues that you've had to deal with. I think it's vitally important that we get new low-emission U.S. vessels in the Jones Act fleet, and I hope that you will be our trailblazer for better things to come.
Well, thank you, Stas. Certainly, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. Okay, my friend, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Stas. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we are now going to, I'm going to introduce Mike Jacob, who needs no introduction. You all know who he is. He is the legal counsel for PMSA. He's been what I would say our point man on the Howard Terminal issue since the get-go. PMSA and Mike are involved along with other maritime partners and stakeholders in several lawsuits at the current time. These lawsuits are complicated, and I would very much like to have Mike come in and explain who's on first here so that we can see where we are going to go. And what I can say is that the job that has been done on the legal front has been really impressive. We are very grateful to the people who helped put this together. And Mike, your contributions have been absolutely outstanding. And we thank you for all of the good work that you have done to try and safeguard our waterfront.
Thank
Mike
you,
Jacob.
Stas. Yeah, really appreciate that. And those thanks really go all the way around to a lot of other folks that are on this this call and otherwise engaged. And we have, I think, you know, a little bit of preaching to the choir here. A really unique and potentially unprecedented consolidation of pretty much everyone on the waterfront on the same page on this issue. And as everyone who's been around for a long time, you know, to get everyone to essentially be rowing the same direction in our industry is pretty remarkable. You know, a lot of, I think, you know, just common sense has prevailed on most everybody that we talk to when you ask the question, you know, what do you want to see happening in this space? Pre-pandemic, everyone was on the same page. Post-pandemic, it just solidifies for everyone how important it is that we maintain access to the waterfront, that we're maintaining acreage and space as it comes up and is necessary, and given the amount of supply and demand fluctuation that we see at our seaports, that we're preserving those options. So thank you to Propeller Club for inviting me back to give this update too. You know, those of you that know Stas well knows that he's not going to take no for an answer when he wants to make sure that he stays engaged, and that's to the betterment of the whole industry, because we're all obviously having these conversations on a regular basis. So appreciate the forum. And I'm going to give a quick update on the project just in general, for context for the lawsuits too. So just to again touch base on where we are. At the beginning of this year, the Oakland City Council voted to move ahead and certify the environmental impact report for the Howard Terminal project. And that kicked off a couple of different timelines. One was it created the basis for a specific timeline for BCDC, the Bay Conservation Development Commission, to act. That requirement was put in to statute by a bill that was sponsored by the Oakland A's and the state legislature in 2019, to require a decision by BCDC on an accelerated timeline. So that got kicked off. The other thing that happened when the city certified the EIR is it set a time for challenges to the EIR to move forward, and that was a 30-day process. So those two things got initiated in February of this year. The timeline for total action on a CEQA suit under the accelerated schedule, again in another bill adopted by the legislature at the request of the A's, was 270 days from filing for the entire litigation associated with the EIR to move forward and then be resolved both at the Superior Court level and at the Appellate Court level. That 270-day window is December. And so in the context of kind of where we are with the litigation, both of these actions were moving forward in parallel, and we'll talk about those in that same context because there's some interplay between the interactions that we're having on the litigation that was filed with respect to the EIR and the actions that were taken by BCDC and subsequent filing of new litigation there as well.
Mike, excuse me,
Yeah.
how many lawsuits are there total right now?
Right now there are 2.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, when we scheduled this and said, can you come on September 6th, we expected the trial court in Alameda County Superior Court to be wrapped on the EIR litigation. That has not yet occurred. Our hearing on that was last Friday, and we're expecting a ruling from the court next week. And I'll go into a little bit of detail on that with some specifics, but with the caveat that I'm not commenting or offering any opinions on what the judge may or may not do or any of those things. I don't want to in any way, shape, or form say anything out of school. But the good news there is on the timing is that we have a process that, even though it's accelerated, is still very deliberative. For those of you that were able to watch any of the hearing last Friday, it was just about 5 hours long. The process of going through, obviously, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of the EIR and distilling it down to not only briefing documents, but a decision by the court and real cogent argument by all of the participants is really quite a remarkable effort in the short amount of time that we've had to do it. But I think all the parties were very well represented. There's essentially what's going to happen is there's going to be a ruling that we expect within the next week to 10 days. At that time, what we expect would be something that's very similar to what the judge put out in his tentative ruling in terms of the scope of what is being discussed. And so that's something, Stas, I can forward to you, so you can forward to the group. People can see the tentative ruling and get a sense of where the judge was coming from. And again, I don't want to prejudge what's going to come out of the final, but the schedule that was laid out by the judge is once we get a final from him, that after that, then there will be a separate question of what do you do in the case that the ruling comes back and says there are portions of this EIR which were inadequate. And the city of Oakland asked for the opportunity to potentially brief and argue the remedies for those types of deficiencies. And so that might add some additional time into the calendar as well, provided that the general assumption of everybody is the case, that there will be a an appeal of some sort, likely by both parties, to the Court of Appeal. Again, that'll happen. And we're looking for a complete resolution on all of those issues in December. What does that mean for the project when there's a complete resolution is a bit up in the air, because again, we don't know what the scope and scale of the judge's ruling is going to be, or what remedies the city is going to have imposed on them if they were not certifying a complete environmental impact report. But kind of the range of things that could occur include a direction to recirculate the entire EIR, to providing a supplemental component of the EIR, to basically just doing some directed cures on mitigation measures. It kind of runs the gamut of what a judge feels is appropriate. But in any of those circumstances, if the certification of the EIR was incomplete, as a general matter, you'll need to remedy that in some way, shape, or form. And that will include additional research, additional public comment, and additional work on the actual project itself. I think what we can say is that we are really, really comfortable and confident with our review of the project. Many of you on this call have done your own reviews and submitted your own comments. And even if at a environmental impact report level, the questions of significance as a matter of law, when you're looking at it as the court, or you're this judge, or you're the appellate court looking at it on appeal, whether or not you meet a legal standard doesn't mean that we haven't identified very important issues moving forward that have yet to be addressed. And the reason why that's important, especially to the folks on this call, is because in many respects, the project, whether it clears the environmental clearance or not, is not our touchstone, right? I mean, obviously we want something that is properly certified moving forward under the Environmental Quality Act. But more importantly, to most of the folks on this call, they want a project that's not going to interfere with their business, whether that means it's a CEQA matter or not. And so, one of the issues that has been brought up repeatedly in the context of this conversation that we were having leading up to the EIR adoption with the City Council was whether or not the seaport compatibility measures that had been promised us were completed, and obviously they were not. The City Council recognized that when they passed their ordinance that directed their staff to work with us on seaport compatibility measures the same time they certified the EIR. And unfortunately, shortly after that, the city and the port both informed us that they couldn't have those conversations with us while the EIR was pending. So we're in a bit of a catch-22 there, and a little bit of limbo. But I think we're back to the same point I was making before, which is it doesn't really matter at some level whether or not it's this is resolved through CEQA or not. If it doesn't get resolved, it doesn't get resolved, and it's an issue that we need to keep keeping our foot on the gas pedal on. We're not going to go away. We're obviously not going away without being really loud about the need to address things like truck displacement. Where's that additional acreage going to come from? Where are you going to provide those types of activities? And that's a good lead into that conversation about BCDC. So again, many of you on this call, and thank you very much, were engaged in that process. Boy, some of the folks on this call, like Ellen, have lived and breathed BCDC for decades, and know that one of the things that is really positive about the fact that we have an entire seaport planning process at the regional level is that it sets the stage for making decisions about how to prioritize industrial needs that we have that are water dependent. And in that conversation over several different iterations of the seaport plan for years, we've been able to rely on the studies that have been completed by third-party consultants for setting the baseline for that conversation. And when you do that, you're doing regional planning on, a basis that everyone can agree on what the facts are, and then you have a genuine policy debate. How much of this property do I want to set aside for this purpose? What's in the best interest of the bay? We just don't feel that that happened here. With the amount of lead-in and time that we had to work on this process, we had over 2 years to develop a factual record, and then to go back and ask the experts who were developing that factual record, the ports themselves, to comment on that study. All of that essentially happened again at the very beginning of this year. Those meetings were held in January, February, March with the Seaport Planning Advisory Committee, and then in the time frame of April and May, leading up to the June public hearing, as many of you know, there was a lot of additional information that was brought to the commission, but it didn't go through the Seaport Planning Advisory Committee process. It skipped that entirely. And frankly, it was an attack on the third-party consultant report that had already been peer-reviewed by 2 different peer reviewers, and also reviewed by all the ports prior to that. So that process became very political. And unfortunately, one of the things that happened in that process was the fact that this timeline that I referred to earlier was sitting out there, compelling action by BCDC on an accelerated basis. And that was put in statute by the A's to force a decision, and in our estimation, to shut down deliberation and open conversation about what was going to happen after the EIR was adopted. And that's what happened. As a result of that, our review of those final documents as members of the public was somewhat truncated. It also impacted the ability of the staff at BCDC to analyze and update their environmental assessments. So BCDC essentially has to go through a parallel process to an EIR. They have the ability and good fortune of having a streamlined process where they get to do an environmental assessment instead of a full EIR. But those environmental assessments still need to meet basic criteria under CEQA. And so our lawsuit is based on a couple of different claims. But again, when the commission took its final action on June 30th, we had a relatively small window in which to file a litigation, which we did. We filed that in Alameda County Superior Court as well. That has been assigned to the same judge that is handling our current CEQA litigation. So they'll be very familiar with the record and the project and the case at hand. But really there's 3 claims in that litigation. One of them is that the commission, BCDC, did not fully satisfy its obligations under CEQA when it developed its environmental assessment. And chief amongst a lot of that conversation is the fact that they developed that environmental assessment without the benefit of all this last minute information that was dumped in their lap. And so they got put in a catch-22. They had a timeline where they had to deliver an outcome. Leading up to that timeline, they built an environmental assessment based on the data that they had. And then over the last 2 months, the port and the A's and the city decided they were going to provide a whole lot of new information that wasn't part of the original environmental analysis. We pointed that out pretty robustly. Obviously, we have some other claims with respect to the environmental assessment too, we just think is not done properly or well. But the last minute data dump really compromised a lot of that integrity. Same thing is true for the next claim, which was with respect to the nature of that proceeding. Under California law, public agencies cannot do things which are arbitrary and capricious. And that is a high standard, but we think that that was breached here as well for many of those same reasons. And then the third claim we brought was actually for conflict of interest. As many of you know, and we're following the project, the chair of BCDC, Zach Washburn, who many of us know very well and have a lot of respect for. He's a really good guy. Unfortunately, it was recusing himself routinely leading up to the vote, but then in the meeting with the vote, the hearing and the meeting prior to that, refused to continue to recuse himself. He was recusing himself prior to that on the basis of his representation of the Oakland A's. He was their attorney. In other contexts, not including Howard Terminal. And he got an opinion from the Fair Political Practices Commission that said he did not need to recuse himself any further. We disagree with that. So that's our third and final claim that we brought in our lawsuit with BCDC. There's obviously a lot to unpack there in terms of the specifics. And with respect to timing on that case, it's not subject to a accelerated calendar like the sequel case is. So in terms of where that sits, we don't know yet. We haven't had our case management conference laying out a calendar, but that will not be proceeding on an expedited timeline. And that will be handled through the courts in the normal course of business. So we think that's really important because obviously the BCDC land use designation is the key cornerstone of an entitlement for this site. There is no chance for having a stadium or a hotel or commercial real estate or any other type of housing or open space or parks on that site as long as it retains its industrial zoning and its Seaport priority use designation. And the Seaport priority use designation from BCDC is the key to maintaining that site in its current use. That's kind of our litigation update. Before we kind of move on, Stas, we've got a couple other updates. One was right before summer break, we were very pleased that the Oakland City Council agreed to schedule a third-party review of this process before they vote on it. So the city process that's moving forward that's still outstanding outside of the environmental impact report is that they need to approve a series of things and they'll bring them as a package to the city council. They need to have a development agreement. They need to have a zoning amendment. They need to have a general plan amendment. They need to have a community benefits agreement. And there's several other components that they need to put all together with respect to financing of the plan. They need to have an idea of what public grants are going to be included from the state and federal governments for the project and for its related infrastructure, and what their infrastructure financing district is going to look like. There's that whole package needs to come together. And obviously there's a series of questions that the city council had with respect to what is this going to cost us? Who's holding the bag? Where's the liability associated with these projects? what happens if the tax increment financing doesn't materialize at the rate that's projected? What happens if we get a federal grant for $200 million, but the actual cost of the infrastructure is $300 million, things like that. The city council agreed to schedule a item for September 20th to hear an independent review of all of those development components. Those development components have not yet been fully negotiated, and they're not in final form. So there's nothing to analyze. And if there's nothing to analyze, there's nothing to schedule at city council. So they scheduled that for September 20th. What we're hearing now is that it's probably more likely that that will be rescheduled for later in the fall, maybe as late as November, with some sort of action, potentially if there is a development agreement in December. So that's kind of where we stand on all that stuff. So I know there's a lot of moving parts still, but we're kind of getting to that place where the city and the A's really need to put their cards on the table and say what it is they want this final deal to look like.
And do you have a sense that they are near or far in that process?
You know, it's hard to say. They've put out a couple of things in public. I mean, they don't pick up the phone and call and tell us what's happening. So we get to glean that from public statements. But there's a couple things. One is both out of City Hall and out of the team, they've both said that they're waiting on more public money from federal grants before they can get to an agreement on what the final development financing is going to look like. One of those rounds we know is not going to come for a while. There's some kind of fundamental questions there underlying, what those grants are for, how much they're intended to cover. And then the secondary component of that is obviously the same thing that's been holding them up for a while, which is the question of if there are cost overruns, who's on the hook for those things. And the city council has been very clear in saying that they don't want the city to be paying for that with public tax funds and tax revenues. And the A's have been very clear that they don't want to pay for offsite infrastructure directly either. So they're going to have to figure out how that works. So that's one component. The second component, again, picking this up from communications, is that there's no final community benefits agreement. And the groups that have been working on the community benefits agreement from the community side have really indicated that there have not been any conversations with the A's over the past 3 or 4 months that they would view as productive. So I don't know exactly what stage that's going to be in, but several of those city council members have said from the very start, if we don't have robust community participation and then a community benefits package, an agreement that people in the community can support, they're not going to be supporting the project. So those things still need to be negotiated.
And what about affordable housing? Is that part of that?
Yeah.
So that's still not resolved. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And one more quick question for me. The Seaport Committee voted to reject the Howard Terminal project, and that was overturned by this sudden data dump that you referred to. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in this going back to the BCDC process, in the course of the development of the Seaport Planning Advisory Committee recommendation, right? When they were doing that process, that's what I was referring to with respect to where all the studies were being done. That committee held, I think it's May. I could be off because it's very early pandemic, May 2020. Held its first big hearing on what do we want to do moving forward, what do we want our timeline to be, and how are we going to address the question of new information going forward about this project, but also about the Seaport plan in general. So, it's probably worth pointing out that the Seaport Planning Advisory Committee is not called the Howard Terminal Advisory Committee. It's for the entire Seaport plan.
Right.
And it's for the whole Bay Area. And so the context for the Howard Terminal Plan was really supposed to be in the context of an update for the entire Bay Area, where you look at all these things in one kind of big fell swoop. And then again, you're going back to this question of regional planning. Once you identify what the total needs are, then you can make some decisions as a policymaking body about, do I want to intensify uses here? Do I want to deindustrialize here? How am I going to accommodate these types of pressures on the Bay moving forward? And there's it's policymaking, it's legislating, it's a judgment call. You have to give people the ability to look at facts and then make decisions based on those facts, right? And that's what the Seaport Plan Advisory Committee is set up to do. Unfortunately, because of this timing requirement that was triggered by the passage of the EIR, the Seaport Planning Advisory Committee wasn't moving forward in the context of, here's our total set of amendments to the Bay Plan, which is what their process is set up to do. It turned that committee into do I want to do a thumbs up or thumbs down on Howard Terminal, which is really not what its core mission is, right? And so it's unfortunate that those things weren't able to move in the same timeline and context and recommendation up to the full commission, where the full commission could see the full context of those things. And instead it got pulled out and isolated. And so, yeah, so pretty soon, Stas, what happened was, once you went to the full commission, it became just a referendum on this project, because that's the question that was presented, as opposed to a contextual question within the broader scope of an update to the full Bay Plan.
Okay, and real quick, the Seaport Advisory Committee advises BCDC?
Yeah.
So it's in there for that. And when they were asked to vote up and down, they voted down. Is that correct? Okay. Scott Taylor, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I sure do. Thanks, Stas. And Mike, man, I can't thank you enough for your contributions to this program. I don't know where we'd be without you as one of our leaders. I don't want to repeat what Stas said, but all I can say is I'm glad you're on our side. But I have two questions for you, Mike. Number one, our third claim against the BCDC and the fact that the chair did not recuse himself, we lost that vote by 25-2 or something. So, I mean, couldn't the judge just come back and say, well, you're right, he should have recused himself, but it's only one vote. You still would have lost the vote. So is that really something that we can hang our hat on?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. It works the opposite way.
Okay.
And our argument would be all the more reason for the chair to have recused himself. It didn't matter one way or the other. It's just the right thing to do. But under California law, if you have conflicts of interest, or you have interested parties, or you have, the classic is someone who has a contract with someone, those actions are voidable. Even if it was just one person, even if it wasn't the swing vote, even if it wasn't a deciding factor, you can void decisions for the presence of interested parties or potential conflicts.
So it was a flawed process. the entire process was flawed if he didn't recuse himself. Obviously, there's a conflict of interest, but.
Well, and I think it's not that obvious, and that's kind of the point, right? I mean, it's
Okay.
We take some exception to the Fair Political Practices Commission determination, but they're the expert agency, and they determined that there wasn't a conflict under the Political Reform Act. But there are other ways to have conflicts too, and there are common law bases for conflicts, and one of those, which we're all very familiar with, is a relatively amorphous standard, and the standard is there an appearance of impropriety? If you have an appearance of impropriety under common law, you should recuse yourself as a public official. But it's very hard to, determine whether or not there's an appearance of impropriety if you're the Fair Political Practices Commission writing someone an advice letter.
Okay.
So that's going to be a critical question. But I think we all, it's one of those places where it's hard to define, but you know it if you see it. And that's kind of close to where some of this stuff is. But I do think on the question of do you need that vote? Obviously they did not. But leading up to the actual commission hearing in the meeting, because of the SPAC vote that Stas was referring to, there was an intensity and an urgency about that. It raised alarm bells for people. I think they assumed that that was just going to be a slam dunk for the A's, and it really was not.
Right.
So.
And real quickly, my second question has to do with this economic study that was supposed to be submitted September 20th. And obviously, number one, has an independent company been assigned that project yet? I mean, we don't want this to just be done by the city. We know where that'd go. If the city does the independent study, that's BS. That's not an independent study, number one. And number two, not only who the company is, but if it's not done until November or December, obviously the mayor will be out by that time. Of course, we could get somebody that's worse for our case. You got to be careful what you wish for. So, but that delays the whole project to sometime next year now, right?
Yeah, it's not going to go quick. We don't know who they're going to pick, or if they have picked someone, or who the consultant is. But we'll keep asking until we do. We've just, and I think, just for the edification of folks on this call, we've been really lucky to have responsive city council members, and they might not always be voting our way on all these other things as the project has moved through, but they've been very open and having conversations with us and wanting to hear from us. And so, to Scott's point, to the extent that there's a fundamental problem with any of that report, or we feel that it wasn't done correctly or anything like that, we feel pretty confident we'll have the ability to have conversations with city council members about those deficiencies.
Right. Okay. Ellen.
Great. Thank you.
Ellen, go ahead.
Thank you. This conversation is bringing me close to tears because, as Mike said, yeah, I've been living and breathing BCDC since I was in legislature, writing the bill, working at BC, writing the McAteer-Petrus Act, working at BCDC, and then cheerleading and championing the coalition that's been supporting maritime industrial use and the sacredness of that in the Bay and around the state. With that said, I just want to let you know, I've been working behind the scenes. I did have phone calls from commissioners wanting to know how I would, what I recommended. And of course, I recommended that they support the Seaport Advisory Committee, anyway, not to, vote obviously the way most of them did, the majority did. So I'm really glad you filed a lawsuit. And the reason that my question is, How does the timeline, if there's no timeline on hearing the BCDC lawsuit in Alameda County Court, is there going to be a timeline, and how does that affect the ultimate, decision on the EIR? I mean, how does that play into it?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. And thanks for doing that behind the scenes. I appreciate that.
I mean, oh my.
So we'll have pretty soon we'll have a scheduling meeting. We'll have a case management conference on what the schedule for the BCDC lawsuit will look like. No idea what that's going to look like until we have that conversation with the Attorney General's office and with the DAs. But I would suspect that just in general, because of the nature of the interplay between the CEQA lawsuit and ultimately the question of how the environmental assessment moves forward at BCDC, is that parties would not be inclined to try to argue something before December. That would be really quick, right? That would be really quick. And there's a secondary component of it too, which is I don't really know, and actually you might, Ellen, what the requirements for compiling the administrative record are for an environmental assessment at BCDC, because they don't have to go through the same process as other state agencies do for a full EIR. And that's probably going to be a question too. Is, one of the things that people on this call might know is when you hear people talk about how long it takes to do CEQA, a lot of the delays in court that are associated with that have to do with actually compiling the administrative record for these things and not actually making the arguments based on the administrative record, just because the processes take so long, they involve so many people, they're so intricate, they deal with so many different issues. If a public agency isn't anticipating litigation, or they're not interested in developing the resources to manage their case files this way, they might not have had the administrative record put together in a way where it's relatively easy to compile. A lot of times that takes a lot of time. So they might not even be in a place where they could move something before December for briefing if the administrative record isn't put together.
Well, they have to do that. I mean, yeah, they're right. It's a little bit looser than, because they do an environmental assessment. They are not, and they refuse and never really, hardly ever in the 50 years or more that they've been in existence, wanted to be the lead agency compared to the water board. And they will be the lead agency, and I've used them for other projects for the water board. But BCDC, so the CA is a little bit looser, but they still have to do a very diligent, thorough administrative record and compiling. And I mean, what they've produced so far is very bad, very bad. So
yeah,
right on. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think it's a great question, Ellen, because I don't know what how long people estimate that's going to take. And then I mean, a lot of what and since we have you on, Ellen, maybe this is a question back for you. A lot of what we kept hearing from commissioners was how they really want to defer issues to the permitting stage as opposed to dealing with it now. And so, Ellen, maybe you could opine on this a little bit too. How would they make a decision on a permit if they didn't have the facts associated with it when they were making the decision about the planning?
No, they can't. No, they can't. No, that's not correct. Not valid. Yeah, they can't, because I've been through several cases like that where they, making a Bay Plan amendment. I just did a real simple Bay Plan amendment for bringing as I say, the historic ferry boat Klamath back to the Bay. We had to get an amendment to dock another ship in the Bay because it was prohibitive on the San Francisco waterfront. And we had to do a really thorough job on on the Bay Plan Amendment in order for them to permit the mooring of the boat there. And I mean, what this whole issue over at Howard Terminal is just so huge compared to that silly thing, but we really had to work hard just on that process. So I would say they would be unable to grant a permit without back from any amendments. Yeah.
Ellen, thank you very much for that. We've got one final question and then we've got to sign off. Evie Wong.
Oh, thank you, Stas. Thank you, Mike. I really had this huge question since the beginning of this year to the end of June vote by BCDC, where it just was so strange to me that the Seaport Advisory had advised one thing, or that's what my impression was, and then the vote that came from BCDC that went against what I thought the Seaport Advisory had advised on. And what you're saying here in this meeting is that it somehow got politicized, and was it the need to vote due to the EIR that forced the vote, or there were other things in place? I mean, the whole thing seems like a game of hot potato, that it bounces between BCDC to the city council to Alameda and no one wants to take responsibility. But ultimately, and why I really had thought it should be a ballot measure, the residents of the city of Oakland should have a say on whether they want a ballpark and transform that whole waterfront property and beyond, because the repercussions are great. The voters don't even get to have a say, and taking land away from industrial zoning like this, what is examples of things that have been done in the past? It's my head wants to explode with all of the improprieties of the whole thing on Howard Terminal.
Yeah.
Mike, a real quick wrap up on that question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think Evie, you hit the nail on the head. The whole process is one of incremental bites at the apple by the project. And that's what's so infuriating, right? There's so many different forums here. Everyone says, I'm not making the final decision here. I'm just doing my one little piece, right? The two components of that are not necessarily that way are the ones we just had. The EIR is intended to be the master document for all intents and purposes, not just for the lead agency, but for all the subsequent responsible agencies that touch that project. And the regional planning component at BCDC is the one which is supposed to essentially be the place where you have that debate about what do you want the future of your waterfront to look like. And so you're going to continue to be frustrated by all the different agencies that are making small incremental decisions here and there. But these two components of them really do speak to a bigger question of not just policy, but also just all the facts that are supposed to be brought to bear before a policymaker makes a decision.
And on that note,
oops, Stas, we lost your sound.
Stas, you're muted.
Sorry about that. This has really been an excellent analysis, Mike. We have two lawsuits and they could change a lot. And obviously what you've said is that the EIR has a number of components in it, and the adequacy of that document is still for the court to decide. And secondarily, the regional planning process, at least from our standpoint, and of course we're biased, is also open to some questions. And Ellen, your input there, I think, is very valuable about how that seaport process was supposed to have worked and may not have worked. And Scott, we continue to share this confusing process that has been really never ending. And I don't even want to go into the question of what ro-ro space at the port of Benicia had to do with the terminal. And we're not going to go into that, but I want to thank you very, very much for being where you are, Mike, for keeping us informed. This process clearly is not at an end. And I think that the longer this process goes on, the longer a number of people who are financing and supporting this are going to have to ask themselves, are they willing to go on and on and on? So on that note, I want to just remind everybody that the Propeller Club will be meeting on October 25th via Zoom with a Sector Commander of U.S. Coast Guard, Taylor Lamb, and his cybersecurity team. And we are going to have a cybersecurity presentation at that time. So anybody who's interested, we hope you'll be there. I want to thank Pasha for their presentation. I think that was very heartening for those of us who hope that there's hope for the Jones Act and U.S. flag. Mike, Evie, Scott, Ellen, thank you all for your input. And we hope that there will be a resolution that is fair and equitable at the end of the day. And again, thank you all for your time and efforts, and hopefully we will see light at the end of the tunnel.